Probably happy.
All right, welcome everyone. We're just getting started. All right, Susie, go ahead.
Okay, you know, this year is different for me in not the sense that we're talking about, but since I've been taking so many classes here and really learning, enjoying it so much, and then my bat mitzvah courses and training, I feel like this whole thing, my mind is exploding and I'm learning so much. But with that, my extended family, I won't have my children here. It's a long story. They're up in New York, and one is modern Orthodox and they don't drive, and my daughter can't. But the rest of the family, which is 25 people, will be at my niece's house, and there's different tables set up, so we're not all in one room, and a lot of children and a lot of mixed marriage. So it's never been a very religious, I mean, you know, we read from the Haggadah, you know, we do the symbols. That's really about it. But since I've been learning so much this year, I want more. And I'm not sure how to integrate more into this with what they're used to. And I'm just trying to feel how I can make changes this year, because there needs to be changes. So I'm not sure, and this is a really dumb question. So, you know, I'm learning.
No question, there are no dumb questions.
Can a woman lead the service?
Sure.
Of course.
Why not?
I didn't know, that's why I'm asking.
And I got them on North of that.
I could just, I could take that because I feel the same way, but it's because the family is changing, and now my little grandchildren, they're really older. They want, some of them finished college, they're like young adults. So the approach, I want to change it too, and I'm in the same dilemma, and that's one reason I took time off today from cleaning off to come here to see if we had any other ideas, because I'm facing the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, no, thank you for sharing that, Susie. Thanks for adding to that. You know, it's this, I mean, this every year, I mean, personally, you know, I try to put in a lot of time into the Seder, right? And thinking about how to involve different people, you know, and there are a lot of good suggestions that I can share in one of the Haggadah, the original Noam Zion Haggadah that's there, but like, one is, you know, you can think about assigning things to people in advance, right, that are like appropriate. For example, you know, one for people who aren't as connected or might not be Jewish, you can think about Karpas in spring and something new that happened, and what's something new that symbolizes spring that they learned this year, and those types of questions that help engage them thematically. But also it's important to remember too that you need to respect where people are, right? And kind of think about it even as a gradual process, right? Over a few years, maybe ramping up some things that you're doing there, experimenting with this or with that. Some maybe work better than others, as you know, try to fit those things together. And I hope, you know, some of the resources today also I hope will help with that too. But thanks for that, Susie. And I should say we are looking forward to Susie and Debbie as well, looking forward to their adult B'nai Mitzvah on May 11th, which will be very, very fun. Good. Was there anybody else who wanted to kind of share anything that's on their minds as they come together here? Anyone online? Okay. Oh, Sam, go ahead, Sam.
I like to emphasize freedom. I always read to pour out thy wrath. And I think that vengeance against those who actually did the evil acts should be, you know, it should be like a scalpel rather than a hammer, or just should not try to avoid the those who are not innocent. And I do a certain reading, but I'm a guest at a Seder, so I don't have that much, you know, I don't really, it's not my place to tell them what to read, but I can bring this thing here to the Aliyah Hazeh, and maybe perhaps they'll do a reading or something like that. But I think how we define freedom and what freedom is part of what try to have in the Seder. That's it.
Thank you.
Rabbi, tell Sam that
Robin Sue says you can do whatever you want at the Seder, Sam, so. Great. Sheldon, I see you waving. Unmute, Sheldon, unmute.
Sorry, on the pour out thy wrath thing, I think it's a sort of it's important to me because when you say pour out thy wrath, that was written during the time of the Crusades. And it was a Jew standing up at his doorway with a straight back saying, pour out thy wrath. He had the guts to do it. But in about 1521, which was not that long ago, another 600 years, it's pour out thy love. People think it was written recently, but it was written in Worms, Germany, pour out thy love, that you can find in some of the Haggadot that are out there. So you can look at it as historical. Pour out thy wrath at a time when the Jews were getting killed by his crusaders, and pour out thy love when people are actually starting to understand Judaism or understand hatred. And that was in the 16th century. I think that it's a beautiful to be able to say both of them. I think is very nice.
It is, Sheldon, but I'm sorry to burst your bubble a little bit. You're right, that's in many Haggadot, but actually it was a few years ago, it was discovered that the source that those all drew from was a forged source. The pour out thy love source. And so it wasn't as ancient as we thought, which doesn't mean it's still not a beautiful little reading that we have in there for everything else, but it was not at that time. But I mean, I always think about the pour out your wrath thing, in some ways, I think that's one of the parts that we can understand differently this year, right? I mean, and you can imagine as a powerless people for as long as we were powerless, when we didn't have much to do against those who were killing us, right? And, that outlet of that emotion, pour out their wrath, as someone would just stop these people from the pogroms, from this, from that, like, you can understand where that's coming from, right? And as much as maybe I intellectually sort of understood that in past years or tried to, or if there are other years we look at that and we feel like, ooh, how could we say that? That's so terrible. And then something like October 7th happens. And I think I think we can understand that emotion better, right? I'm not condoning it into action. This is where it gets complicated, right? Because now, when that was said years ago, we were powerless, right? There's not much we could practically do against that persecution, anti-Semitism, and even murder and rape and everything that was taking place during the Crusades or other times in history, right? Today we do have power, right? And in some ways, I think it makes that pour out thy wrath section like that much, this is depending on your Seder company here to have the conversation, right? But what does that mean to say that when we're powerless versus what does it mean to say that when we have power? And I think that's a really hard question of, in the face of all the terrible, terrible things that were done to our people on October 7th, we can get the emotional outlet, but then how shouldn't that translate into dealing, right? So that's I think a very especially challenging part of the Seder this year. So thank you for sharing some of those pieces. Let me share a few things with you to kind of help with the conversation. So the first thing I want to do, for those here, I'm going to pass this around. Those who are online, I'm going to share my screen in a moment. There's more coming down. Here's some more. So this is something. So this is something from the Noam Zion, Michelle Zion Seder supplement that they created. I copied it from here. For those online, I'm going to share my screen right now with that. So this is the front page of that. This is their. Coming around. I can make more copies afterwards if you need to. Also can share all these. I think I was thinking the weekly email this week. There's so many good resources out there. I might just share all of these out for everybody to see. So So there's this really nice section towards the end of this Haggadah here, and for those online, here's what we're looking at. It should become less blurry in a moment. There we go. By Dasi Berkowitz, who's an educator in Israel, kind of addressing head-on, as you can see, a guide for parents and families, how this night is different than all other nights, right? How this Passover is different from all other Passovers. We won't look at the introductory page yet. I encourage you to read that on your own. I think it does a nice job of articulating a lot of what we're feeling, at this time. But if you take a look at the second page, she offers 4 different frameworks for sort of thinking about setting up your Seder. And, these are frameworks, right? They may or may not work for you. There are different options for your Seder, but I think they're helpful in kind of thinking through how we might want to frame some things based on what we think is appropriate for around our table. So I want to take a few minutes to go through each one to think about it a little bit. So let's start with framework 1. They're on page 30. Let's have someone else read. You don't need me to talk all the time. Someone just read that one, framework 1 about setting intentions, enable freedom within boundaries. All right, Bonnie, go ahead, nice and loud.
At the As the convener, you set the tone for the evening. This takes place from the moment you extend the invitation by articulating your intentions for the evening to put your family and other guests at ease. The journey toward freedom invites full participation when there is structure. Just as children can express themselves freely when the boundaries are clear, your guests will feel comfortable sharing openly when boundaries are set and intentions articulated.
So just pause right there, right? In a way, this is education 101, right?
Yeah.
Like kind of, framing things there. We don't always think about the Seder like a classroom, but in certain settings, again, I know it's not one size fits all, but in certain settings, it is like setting up a classroom. And I imagine, just like many of us are going to these Seders this year, thinking about wondering, like, what's it going to be like? What are we going to talk about? What are we going to say? I imagine most of the people coming, perhaps with the exception of the kids who need a different type of boundary set, right, are wondering the same thing. Am I going to ask what I think about Israel? Am I going to have to talk about this? Am I going to have to talk about that? And setting those boundaries at the beginning, or those intentions at the beginning, can be helpful in making people feel at ease and have a sense of what to expect, right? And it's like, there's that midrash about the word harut, right? That says the 2 tablets of the 10 Commandments were inscribed harut, right? And the midrash that says, don't read that word as harut, inscribed, read it as herut, as freedom, right? It's kind of like the law sets us free, type idea, which, for some it's hard to understand, right? How these restrictions that are put on us set us free. But we know from children in our own lives as well, that if there is no structure to how you live, then things become very amorphous, right? Or very lost, or very moving around. And some sort of structure can help us, guide us to find meaning and purpose and to be productive, right? And similarly, this framework says for the Seder, right? How we try to frame things from the beginning can help people know what to expect, and perhaps hopefully give them more of a sense of freedom to engage in different ways at the Seder. Then she goes on here to give some suggestions for kind of intentions to help encourage participation. And I'm going down to the bullet points here, right, or the diamonds, right? Speak in the first person about your own experiences and opinions. You're saying this is what you should say, or what you should say. These are her suggestions of like things you can lay out there. Share from a place of authenticity, what causes you pain, what brings you joy. Agree to be awkward and know that your contributions will be received with care. Give everyone at the table the benefit of the doubt. Approach each other with curiosity. Right? It's not an exhaustive list, but I think it's a nice suggestion there to kind of help everyone at ease and sort of set the tone from the beginning of what we are and what we're doing. Good. Any thoughts, reactions to that? All right, let's go to the second one. And I'm going to go through these rather quickly because there are things I want to cover, but I think they're worth it. So framework 2, right? Who'd like to read this one for us?
I'll read.
Thank you, Robin Sue.
On all other nights, we front-end Seder experiences that engage the children. This Seder night, our path towards freedom is paved by a resilient spirit. Lessons in resilience are most readily learned from our elders. We need their voices and their stories of how they have come out of Egypt over and over again. Draw out the lessons they learned from enduring adversity. Ask the children to be the bridge to the elders and have them ask the following questions or generate your own. I'm going to read them.
Sure.
Share a political or historical challenge you or your family has faced. How did you overcome or deal with these challenges? And what is a lesson you've learned about resilience that you wish you knew when you were young?
Right, I think this is a nice reframing of this too, right? A chance where, we know that one of the ways in which we build resilience in our children is by being examples of resilience in our own life, right? And being able to tell those stories and experiences, perhaps if it's, not age appropriate to go into what everything's happening in Israel right now, but to say, once, in 1973, the Yom Kippur War I remember, or something in my life that happened that I remember, it's another way that can model this type of resilience. Now, I do think we need to be careful with this one, that it doesn't become only, back in my day, no offense to anyone, but like back in my day, here's how we dealt with it, and just sit and listen, and I'll teach you how to do it, right? Because we know we got to engage the kids and engage everyone at the Seder in these conversations to really learn. But I think this is interesting kind of reframing here that she's proposing of, how do we talk about this? Well, we talk about kind of celebrate resilience and share personal stories of resilience that then can, help model or translate into resilience for today. Option 2, Cindy's not such a fan.
Well, I'm not fortunate. I mean, look, I think we all have personal stories of resilience, but fortunately, I think for our generation, we don't have that many generational stories. I'm reading this and I'm saying, oh yeah, my parents could talk about this for a lot. We were lucky in terms of,
That's right.
when we grew up, we were here, and like we thought anti-Semitism was over, there was the state of Israel,
Much easier.
I mean, so and I'm not sharing my personal stories.
Sure.
We'll leave those out. I mean, of the Seder, I'm certainly not sharing them here, but,
They're recording it,
Resilience is
don't you?
not only about Judaism, you have to be resilient in general.
That's
to
right,
be able to
right.
Deal with that. And I think even though this feels as if it's centered on that, the truth is most of the resilience that we've learned, it's going to be something else, and we bring it to bear, like what is. Well, it depends. Again, those are they're more personal, I think,
I'd say they're
generation. Although
personal.
I will say, I'm old enough to remember from a child, the year of 1968, and just being frightened all the time with multiple assassinations, with the Tet Offensive, and with the ugliness of George Wallace in the presidential election, the presages, today. But I remember being frightened all the time, and my parents helping me to understand this would pass and how you cope with that. So, it's not just a Jewish topic. There's plenty
like
of it.
like where I was, it was an exhilarating year,
Yeah.
1968,
And so as a child, I saw it differently. And
because you're
also,
younger.
yeah, and
Right.
also I had the opportunity, I worked with Russian immigrants in the 70s.
Right.
And even though it's not my personal story of resilience, you can certainly share as I watched what they did and how
Yeah.
they coped. So I think a little bit more broadly, because we all had to deal with it in different ways.
Yes.
To me, the ultimate personal story that'll remain with me forever is the Seders, the making of the matzah, everything in hiding, 1942, 1943, in the ghettos and the camps, and how they would secure the tiny bit of flour, how they would memorize sections of the Haggadah. That's resistance.
Yeah.
Resilience.
Resilience.
Right.
Oh,
I think
resilience.
in the past,
Yeah, and it's something too, like, if you wanted to go this way, right, this is a good thing also to maybe put out there before the Seder to a few people, to give them a chance to think about it. Maybe even bring an artifact, bring a picture, bring something, that, maybe can help illustrate it at the Seder too. And have, 2 or 3 stories, or whatever makes sense for you to kind of share it in framing in this resilience mode, right? Another way to pick up a theme here to go forward with it. Framework 3, I'm going to go through a little more quickly here, but framework 3 is redemptive questioning. This is the way it's, Passover is the night of questions. Trying to focus on helping people ask open-ended questions, right? Putting sort of different questions on the table, not necessarily getting around to the answers. I admit, personally, I find this one a little less satisfying, but it's another framework that can work, right? If you're worried about what answers people might give, you can put the questions on the table. And she gives some examples. Who do you look up to? What inspires you about them? What's a different way of understanding this? So focusing more on the questions. Or you can look at framework 4, the last page here. Elevate gratitude, right? I think in a way, Cindy, this is what you were kind of talking about at the beginning, and the resilience, gratitude, things like this, right? Where, you really, should just take a moment at the beginning of your Seder, and Robin C. was saying this around lighting candles, have people share something that they're grateful for, ask people, and really try to elevate and focus on that idea of gratitude here, right? Celebrating life, right? The life that we have to celebrate. It's another way to think about framing or reframing the Seder. Okay. So I think, these are different, helpful ways to think about how you want to frame your first or second Seder one way or another, and think about which one to emphasize as we go through the story and think about. So any kind of reflections, thoughts on that?
Well, this one resonates with me because that's the approach I was thinking of taking.
The elevate gratitude?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have to be great. I mean, even with all the problems.
Yeah.
So ready to have it.
I know the kids, the grandchildren.
Yeah. And anybody online, just the one, I'm coming back to you. Any wanted to add anything to that? Any thoughts about that I missed before? Want to add now? Okay.
Rabbi,
Good. Yeah, Robinson.
when you talk about the gratitude one, you should bring up the fact that we're Yehudim, that our root word comes from gratitude.
Sure. Right.
We are the people of gratitude.
Right. Yehuda, when he is born, right, the name is given by Leah, is Hodu, this time, oh, thank God, Hodu et Hashem. So we are the people of gratitude. Exactly. All right, so I want to move to a couple other ideas here that I think are some a little more, some a little less subtle ways to kind of acknowledge this, which, might be appropriate with different ages that you're Seder, and could even be appropriate with, only older, kind of not having any younger ones at your Seder, that I found I've come across that I found particularly kind of moving. So one of them is this, I shared this at the men's club, Bourbon and Birds and Bourbon there the other night. And I want to share it again here because I think I really like this one, and I found it very meaningful. So this is also something, this is something that comes from the Shalom Hartman Haggadah supplement, which is well worth it. It's let me put it up on the screen here for everyone too. So just if you go to the Hartman website, and again, the more I talk, the more this Friday, the email message is going to be a bunch of different resources for people to click on and look at, because there's so many good things out there. But Hartman supplement, some of it is the Tzion stuff that you'll see in our supplement, some of it's its own things. But first of all, they lay it out beautifully here, where you can download the whole thing, or you can just pick on different pieces, really covering everything, a lot of good stuff here. Again, some overlap, some not. We really want to focus on this one for Kadesh to elevate their voices. So I'm going to pass this around here. Keep one in the room. For those online, it should pop up in a moment here. So this is for Kadesh, right at the beginning of the Seder. And we know we've talked before how it's interesting. The Seder begins with Kadesh, not Kiddush, or it's called Kadesh, not Kiddush, right? Kiddush, we call it Kadesh because Kadesh is in the Sibu, it's in the imperative. I can make a few more copies if anybody needs. I see some coming around here. And I'll send it out too. So, Kadesh means like make holy, right? Like it's a moment that's not just making Kiddush, but it's a way to sort of set that tone at the beginning of the Seder, saying like, this is, a holy moment. We're gathering together to share these stories. So what they brought here at this moment is a poem written by a man named Avner Goren. Avner Goren lived on kibbutz near Oz with his wife Maya. near Oz is one of those kibbutzim by Gaza that was attacked on October 7th. Avner and his wife Maya were both murdered in their home. Their adult children survived. And Avner, in addition to working on the farm, everything else, was also a poet. And he wrote some beautiful poetry, including this piece, which was written for the kibbutz near Oz Haggadah in 1996. And all this is explained in the top paragraph. You don't need to memorize it. Right, and it came out later in the kibbutz Be'eri Haggadah in 1999. And it's a poem that he wrote specifically for Kadesh to kind of celebrate the different people that come together for the Seder. And it's called Lift Up a Glass. It's actually in Hebrew, it's a play on the word kibbutz, right? Let's lift up a glass. And I'll just read it out loud here. And I plan to use this at my Seder at the very beginning, and you'll see one of the questions for conversation is, in this piece, Avner Goren toasts the members of the kibbutz, and by extension, toasts the Jewish people. As begin your Seder, whom would you like to recognize through a toast, right? I think it's a nice kind of question at the beginning, thinking about that gratitude and thinking about, how we want to express that. It can be people around the table, it can be people in the community, it can be people in Israel, it can be a group of people, right? You can toast whomever you'd like, but it's something that's a question you can pose and then read the poem, which I'll just read out loud here. Lift up a glass. Look at the fruit salad. Some fruits are sour and some fruits sweet. Some are more juicy, some harder to eat. Some are more smooth, some rougher skin treats. Each fruit brings its own taste and colors and texture. And when all mix together, they create something new, far more than just each fruit alone. So too with us. We're made up of all kinds. Some work the land, some look to heaven for signs. Some of us are visionaries, some more practical types. We come in all sizes, all shapes, and all stripes. Some set out on new paths, some settle rather than roam, and each brings their own language, customs, and beliefs from home. We are an ingathering, a kibbutz of peoples, a multicultural nation, an immense breathing and living creation, renewing itself with so much innovation. We lift up a glass to all who return to our land, to the ingathering of exiles, to immigration, to integration, both present and past. We lift up a glass. Right? It's a really beautiful poem, I think very moving way to acknowledge and honor Avner Goren and his wife Maya, Zichronam Livracha, blessed memory, and all those, who were murdered on October 7th. And also a chance to express that gratitude at that moment for all the kind of the acts of resilience and others things we've seen since that day.
So, Rabbi, how would you introduce this to the children?
I would say, this is a poem to do this that toasts people there, was written by someone from this kibbutz that was, attacked on October 7th. You don't need to get the details if you don't need to, and have someone read it, right? Or read it together or whatever makes sense, or go around and read it. So I don't know. I mean, I found this to be very moving and a nice way to kind of acknowledge and to honor people there and to kind of start the Seder off with that sense. Also here too, there's this beautiful picture here. This is Michal Kishka, who's the artist for all the Tzion stuff that we have in our Halayla Hazeh supplement too. As you can see here, right, this is all the flowers, the poppy flowers for Daroma Dome, Daroma Dome, this festival of the flowers down there. You can actually see a picture of it. One of Moshe's pictures out there is there. It's quite beautiful that they spoke about in the Lunch Learn a couple weeks ago. Yeah, sure.
Another thing about Israel is that if you go down there, it's packed. Everybody makes a trip, a 2-hour, 3-hour trip to see the flowers.
Yeah.
It's like very special.
When did it come up?
They come out in February, I think, mid-February.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, when February it was just starting. It was, they were just starting to come.
I think that's terrific that all those people.
They all, not this year, but other years.
Good. So another something else I wanted to share. Well, let me share this one. So this is something that our friend Eli Confer of Hadar, maybe you saw this, wrote a nice piece in the JTA. Let me share it. called "To Mark Our Brokenness This Passover, Let's Scale Back the Matzah on Our Tables." And if you know Ellie, he's not one to scale back much, so it intrigued me on this title. There we go. So what he argues here in this piece is he points out, first naming, right, with so much happening in the world, it seems like doing a full Seder feels like a lot. And I admit it, when I read this, and I initially thought about how on Simchat Torah this year, as we figure, how do we celebrate Simchat Torah when this is going on? We made the decision to not do any dancing, just do the hakafot, to go around with the Torahs, and instead of doing 7 times around, which symbolizes completeness, we only did it 6 times to sort of acknowledge that our joy is very much incomplete this year. And I think in that sort of spirit, Ellie thought about this at the Seder too, about how you change the rhythm to it. And he goes through, and I won't go through all the different texts that he brings here, you can read it if you'd like, but he points out that, the 3 matzah we have at the Seder, right? Like that's the tradition. You have your 3 matzah at the Seder, one you break for the Afikomen, then you end up having 2.5 matzah at the Seder. But actually, for a long time in Jewish history, people only had 2 matzahs at the Seder, right? And even from the Talmud going back, and it was, so then after you broke off your Afikomen, you had 1.5 matzah at the Seder. Because how many loaves do you normally have on Shabbat? You have 2, right? So you have 2 on Pesach as well. Why did we get to 3? Well, so you'd end up to 2, right? Because you're breaking 1 for the Afikomen, you're sending it out, then you have a full 1.5 one, and that just didn't feel right? We always do hamotzi over 2. We don't do hamotzi over 1, right? So, or 1.5. Good. So the question why is it have to do with when the manna rained down in the desert, right? But the Torah says that every day 1 loaf was given to each household of manna, except on Fridays 2 were given because it didn't rain down on Shabbat. God took a break from baking manna on Shabbat, right? And 2 came down. So in memory of the 2 that came down on Friday for Shabbat, we use, the custom to use 2 loaves for Friday night. And also Shabbos day, which always struck me as funny, right? Like we're using 2 loaves. If 2 came down, then use 1 for Friday night, 1 for Saturday. Then we're using 4. But anyway, that's a story for another time. But anyway, So the custom developed, and it's fairly widespread, Ellie says, right? That, people use 3 matzahs at the Seder, right? As I imagine everybody here, uses 3 matzahs there. But he says, maybe this year, he makes a point to say, I'm not arguing this for all time, going back to this older tradition. But maybe this year we should go back to 2. That's a way to show our, that's not a normal year. And here's kind of the operative paragraph here. He writes towards the end. I'm not recommending a permanent change to the Seder, God forbid, but this is not a normal year. With more than 130 of our people literally in captivity, the shock of seeing fewer matzot at the table when we are used to seeing plenty is appropriate. In fact, it is a version of the shock the Seder was originally meant to induce. Unlike every other Shabbat and holiday, our bread, like our hearts, will be in pieces. This is the nature of matzah at the Seder. As Rav Papa indicated, this is quoting from the Talmud, a reminder of our people's long suffering and slavery before being redeemed. Right? So he's referencing back to another source. So, I don't know. What do you think about that? Right? As kind of changing the number of matzah we have is a very kind of noticeable way in this night where we ask, we try to draw attention to questions. Why do we have a second cup? Why do we dip twice? Right? As the Mani Shana says, facing, well, why do we have 2 matzahs at our table as opposed to 3 like we normally do? And we complain, well, because we don't feel like it's a way of complete, right? It's a way of saying we're lacking, a traditional way of saying we're lacking, right? But a way of saying we're lacking. What do you think, Charlie?
I think it's very appropriate and very poignant. I'm thinking a lot lately about my own concept of God and his relationship to the Jewish people. And I'm afraid I've come to the conclusion that often God isn't showing a lot of Rahman to Jews individually, and that so many Jews are killed, slaughtered at such a young age. And also I know that we're not thinking often of the toll on the IDF in Gaza, the body count is up to 600 soldiers have been killed now. That's a huge number for Israel to lose. And then on top of the 1,400 lost on October, huge number. But although God may not be so sympathetic to individual Jews, he seems to have endless love for the people of Israel as a whole. So I think there will always be a remnant, Sharit Israel. I think there will always be that. There will always be a remnant. And I have complete faith that God will ensure that there will always be a remnant. And I have complete faith that it's absolutely miraculous that Israel came into being and that it continues to exist and that it survives. And then this last episode, the fact that so many the swarm of missiles and whatnot, and you talk about Kanfei Shechina. It's nothing less than miraculous, and you can't be it's a non-believer in the face of repeated miraculous events like this. But because of this, the loss of individuals, it is so hard to take, and I think it's very, very appropriate that something like this be done.
Thank you for sharing that. And that also too, like there are many others who, have lost limbs or injured or maimed, the emotional toll, obviously, as well. Like, the layers of that toll on individuals. It's great. Yeah, Al.
I took Rabbi Conference course with a 3-part course on this broken matzah idea, and he went to break that to all kinds of food text to it. But the other thing he kept pointing out was that we say lechem oni in the beginning, halach ma'anya, this is the bread of affliction, and a poor person doesn't get a whole piece of bread, a whole loaf. Rich people do. So when we have 2 full loaves on our Shabbat table, it's a sign of plenty. And by having only 1.5 this year, will remind us that we personally, again, went through slavery, but we're also missing. Our hearts are broken. There's a lot of symbolism that goes with that. And I said we're not going to have it with our kids the first night, and I said, this is a great idea, but I'm not sure whether we want to do it or not. And they weren't sure to do it either, so we're still wrestling with whether we do the 3 or the 2. Lana's reaction was, "Oh, we have to have 3 because that's the tradition, and how can you break with that tradition?" And I'm sort of with that too. On the other hand, this year is not normal, and so this year we can follow a different tradition. So I'll let you know how it works.
I'm glad I recorded you saying we can follow a different tradition. I'm gonna put that on my phone and play that. Yeah, no, okay.
Okay, so you said, when Professor Professor Harris,
Yeah.
you said it, everything talked at you, and why a lot of things are 4, not 3 for the Seder.
Yeah,
Except, I was gonna send an email, we sold 3 pieces of matzah as opposed to 4.
that's true. But we had 2 and it went to 3.
Yeah, I know,
so-
so I said, I'm the question I'm again, but why are we not a 4 matzahs instead of 3 matzahs?
Yeah, I don't know, we haven't gotten there, we haven't gotten there yet. I mean, there is a lot of,
What about
and I wrote, the piece I wrote in the Halei Lazet piece, it's about, kind of give some background as to the explanations for the 3 matzahs, but all of them clearly are, that came into being and they're trying to figure out why it's 3, right, sort of retroactively.
Right.
Yeah.
And when did you write this article by Cornford?
Oh, a couple of weeks ago, I mean, recently, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I mean,
It was just
I don't
published.
read it, but yeah, it just came out, yeah, it's April 10th.
Okay.
April 10th.
I have a tradition just about Rabbi Peltz-Why.
Yeah,
He's the nephew. When he came here I spoke with him.
yeah,
He's a nephew of one of my original teachers at Templars of Great Neck,
and,
who became the head of the New York Board of Jewish Education. All the teachers in Great Neck came from the seminary. They're all seminaries, and it was a very coveted spot to get that job. And they all became very interested people. One was valedictorian. But he spoke about it because his dad started a textual method of studying the Bible, not dad, his uncle, of studying the Bible. And it was pre-Melton. It was like a precursor to Melton. And Rabbi Neil Calford had me teach it to seminary students when there were no women. when I was 16.
Very nice. Good. I want to share one more teaching here, and I apologize for those on the live stream. I don't at the Zoom. It's from the Schechter Institute as well, but for some reason it wasn't up on their website. I got it through my email. I couldn't find it, but they also published a Haggadah supplement this year too. And there's a nice piece about symbolic items which would be added to the Seder plate or table, right? We've talked about in past years. Well, there are other things that have made their way onto the Seder plate or on the table to call our attention to this or that, right? Things going on. And I thought there were some interesting suggestions here that I wanted to throw out. Here's what they write here. This year, we will tie a yellow ribbon around the Kiddush cups or napkins to mark the expectation of all of us for the safe return of the hostages, right? Those yellow ribbons brought those back and have a yellow ribbon on there tying around the napkins or wherever. Another one is we will add a lemon to the Seder plate. In memory of the events of October 7th, a symbol of longing and concern for the safety of the abducted, of sorrow for the fallen and the dead, and for the pain of the wounded. But it's also a symbol of hope, since a lemon may be turned into lemonade, for the hope of better days will come. So it's another idea. I have here too, we will place a flower pot or pots on the Seder table instead of flowers to remember the evacuees who have been uprooted from their homes for many months. May they return safely and quickly to their towns and communities soon. So there's a few, what's this other one? Sorry. And then the last one they have here, we also can put an olive branch or an anemone, right? A poppy, right? Like those flowers, and one of the volunteers who look around and ask, how can I help? How can I support? The anemone or the poppy to the table, a sign of spring and a growth of hope and faith, a resurrection from brokenness and grief. And remember the words of the poet Natan Alterman that said, sunsets on a mountain will burn and fade away, but anemones will always bloom. The people visual stand tall, even in the most difficult days. Together we will build another floor that will bring repair and redemption to the world. So, other ideas there.
One of the classes I take at the JCC, they were talking a couple of weeks ago about an orange.
Yeah.
They're putting an orange.
Yeah.
That's
To represent the women?
Yeah. No, that's not true.
I had
What
heard that one.
represents the gay and lesbian world. And with the orange, and you open it up, you take the little seed inside and you spit it out, anyone who is unaccepting. That's what we think of you, nothing to do with Rudy.
That's
It's never ever true.
But what I'll say is that there have been, as is often the case, symbols can take on multiple meanings. And you can look on, you can even Google, I might use Learning Hat, I don't have it with me right now, but there are a lot of good websites there that list, I mean, there's like tens of things that people have added to Seder plate for different meaning behind them, that you can add to call attention to this or to that, over the course of
Susan
this
Heschel
year. So,
denied that.
She denied the lesbians.
she did not-
No, she denied that it's.
Right, she did.
she
She did deny.
She did the orange, so.
Oh, she didn't come up with the orange?
Well, I would say for, well, no, orange.
But I have heard something.
I never.
Right.
So, I hope that this was kind of helpful, some things through some pieces. I'm curious if anybody, thank you, Gail. So yes, hopefully everybody got this in the mail. If you didn't, or if you'd like another one, we have more. Feel free to pick it up. This is our supplement this year. We did with Noam Tion and Michelle Tion. We hope that this will be helpful too, with you with this year and with your Seder. And of course, if you have other questions or things that can help individually, we're here for them too. And wishing everybody, please God, let's say, liberating peace. Thank everybody.
How can we find more about the two months?
You go to jpa.org.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi.
I'll give you my article. Here's the article. And Ellie Confer is,
Thank you, Rabbi Peltz.
what I'll do for the email this week, I'll put together somebody's send it up to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.